The Finance and Audit Committee meeting. I had to make sure I had the right one first here. Finance and Audit Committee meeting. If you'll all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you, everyone. We're awaiting Mr. Bowers, Mr. Wallace Bowers, and I believe our counsel is walking in at the moment. We will kind of skip the approval of the minutes for the moment, and we're going to go right to the presentation to item. Yes, Catherine has an introduction she would like to begin with.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As all of us are aware, we had an opening on our senior staff last year when Michael Stevens left us and went to the airport, and we wish him well. So we had gone through a recruitment process, and I'm happy to say that we are joined today by Kenyatta Lee. Good morning, Ms. Lee, who is joining us. She's here for the day and then comes back in after Labor Day, correct? Tomorrow is your children's first day of school, including the first day of high school. Not like you're doing anything else. But she was able to come in. We wanted to, start the process of meeting folks as we were going through budget. And Kenyatta's area will, of course, include HR. We're separating risk and safety into two separate areas, so she'll have those two areas, and IT will be going back over to the admin side for IT. But Kenyatta's currently the IT director at Jacksonville Transit Authority, and before that, she was at the Port of Jacksonville, where she had risk management, HR, more the technology, including a labor relations background, and we're very excited to have her on board.
Welcome. Thank you very much. And I see Mr. Bowers is headed in, and what we'll do is before we approve, we're going to skip the approval of the minutes, and I just want to ask, is there any public comment on any of the agenda items? So we have 3 minutes per speaker. Anyone signed up for public comment, or does anyone in the audience want to speak? Okay, with that, we will move on to the approval of the minutes. Do I hear a motion for the approval of the minutes?
So
Second? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone nay? Okay, no nays. The ayes have it. And with that, we will move on to the presentation by Mr. Seward.
Good morning, Mr. Chair,
Good
committee
morning.
members. Jeff Seward, Chief Financial Officer. We are in the final throes of budget development, preparing for the public hearings that we have next month. This is one last overview of the final proposed that will be presented to the full board during those workshops in September. And it is also a continuation of the discussion that we've been having over the last couple of committee meetings and last couple of board meetings on the investment of revenue growth that we have seen in the organization over the last few years, as well as plans for the future for that revenue growth. So combining both of those discussions this morning for you. We have a final proposed operating capital budget, which is balanced pursuant to state law at $97.9 million. This is 15.7% higher than the FY16 adopted budget that we're working in right now. Of that $13.2 million of additional revenue going into the budget for next year, $4.6 million of it is in the operating budget, and 8.5 of that is in the capital budget. And I'm going to go through at a little more detailed level than we typically do at this time as we prepare for the public hearings, particularly based on this investment discussion that we're having, to show exactly where that $13.2 million of additional revenue is being invested in FY17. First, as we always do, we talk about the environment in which we develop the annual budget. This is a process that was started actually back in the February/March timeframe. Right at the beginning of the calendar year, we start on the next year's fiscal budget, assessing the needs of the organization, looking at trends, prioritizing based on your strategic objectives and that of the CEOs. And then we look at what we have and what we're anticipating coming into the next year. So again, we still see incremental growth in operating revenue. We'll talk about where exactly we're investing that increase in operating revenue as we move forward. Ad valorem growth continues to grow. Since 2013, we're starting to see the increases that we saw early in 2000. Bus ridership is starting to plateau. We're still looking at a slight growth rate next year, but the large increases in ridership that we've seen over the last few years have started to ease up. Continued expansion of innovative programs. A lot of the things that we're doing are not being replicated necessarily by other transit agencies. Tomorrow's State of Transit, you'll be able to see some of those things showcased for the community, and we continue to look at those types of investments going into the future budget. Limited enhancements to select routes. They are limited, but they are pursuant to the Transit Development Plan, which will undergo its major overhaul next year. This TDP is the one that was aligned with the original Go Hillsborough plan, so we are sticking with what we have planned over the next 5 years. Stagnant growth in capital and federal funding. Again, stagnant simply means it's not growing, it's not moving. The federal formula funding, which we want to start using primarily for capital again, is pretty much flat and has been flat over the last few years based on the fact that it's a formula based on population growth of the area. Slowing of community-focused capital projects. This doesn't mean that we're not doing anything in the community. This means that large construction projects such as transfer centers or Metro Rapids, they are on the back burner until we find an additional revenue source to be able to do that, or additional federal funding to be able to accommodate those projects. Something that we had to consider going into the budget year are labor negotiations. Before you today as an action item is the Teamsters agreement, which you will consider. The ATU is moving along very well, and we will bring back to you after the adoption of the FY17 budget the impact of that contract once it's negotiated and approved by the board. And then the big shift for our non-bargaining employees going into FY17 is, and we've had the opportunity to brief you on this the last board meeting, is a shift to performance-based compensation, something that we have not done before. It's either been a COLA or a slight adjustment based on CPI or a combination of both. So this year we are actually looking at a true performance-based compensation plan. So the discussion about investment. The first slide you saw that the budget is a $13 million increase over the prior year with a combination of $4 million from operating and $8 million from capital. What I'd like to do is to walk through, and this is some of the data you've already seen in a different format, which is a little easier to follow. So what you see before you is the ad valorem revenue growth for that specific year, the cost of additional service that we put on the street during that fiscal year based on the TDP at that time, and then the percent that service is of that ad valorem increase. So as you can see, since 2014, we have been putting, and it isn't a consistent percentage. It's based on what was approved in the TDP. The question was raised at the last board meeting of what would be a good percentage. At the time, this is the answer. It's based on where we are with the TDP and what the TDP is calling for. As we move into FY17, we'll have the opportunity to have someone come in and help us completely redo the TDP for the 5-year update, which FDOT has allowed us and granted us to move into the next year. So we'll be working on that going into next year.
Oh, excuse me, Jeff. Sorry.
When you finish.
Oh, okay. I thought you wanted to comment now. Pardon me. Go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Okay, so in 2014, we put 79% of that growth, 26, 34. In FY17, we're looking at putting 61.48% of the ad valorem revenue growth into operating.
And on the point that Jeff just made, I would like to stress, this year, for the 17 budget, we're including funds to update and overhaul the TDP. And rather than just do the 5-year update, this is a great time for us to come together on what the agency's vision needs to be midterm and long-term. We've done an awful lot of work on the staff level of tying our budget together with the TDP, so it eliminates guesswork. It's not, ooh, there's extra money this year, let's spend it. It aligns it. But this is our opportunity really to say, what does transit and transportation, not driving yourself, need to look like in Hillsborough County? We have this great event tomorrow where we will be leading the conversation on what's happening regionally and what does that mean for transit and transportation. We have seen some other places around the country do modifications, overhaul their services. To Jeff's previous point, they aren't doing a lot of the innovations we're doing, so we really have this great chance to work with our board, work with our stakeholders and our riders and our communities and say, how does this all to come together? What is the vision? We've heard several times from the board over the summer a sense of, should we be investing differently? How do we trip the investments? Where's the rationale that goes around it? And it sounds that underneath all that is less a sense of not liking what we're doing, but more a sense of it's time to think differently. It's time to take the foundation we've laid to be expansive and redefine transit and maybe move forward with that. So you will be hearing a lot about this in the next year, and we'll be looking to you for your leadership to lead what this vision needs to look like. So we don't have this conversation next year. Next year we're here saying we have knit together our community's vision, and this is how we're fulfilling it, not here's $5 more and how do we spend it.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you.
Okay, Jeff. Thank you for
So this year, 73% of the ad valorem is being used for operating. And a little note at the bottom, the total increase of 4.6 and 8.5, again, it's a $13 million additional revenue enhancement into next year's budget. And we broke it into categories to better articulate to you and the community of exactly where that investment is going. We broke it into 3 categories: community, employees, and organization. And first, we wanted to show how that investment is being divided between operating and capital. And operating 4.6, capital of 8.5. And at the very end of this discussion, I'll show you the breakout of exactly where that revenue is coming from, something that historically we haven't really illustrated to the board of the breakdown of our capital revenues. I want to be able to show that to you today.
Let me ask a question.
Oh, sure.
As I
Mr.
look at
Bowers.
this chart, and we're looking at the 65% for operational and the 35%, is that of the increase alone, or?
That's the increase. That's the 13.2.
Okay.
Yes. So again, of the 13.2, this is broken down into those buckets that I discussed a little earlier: employees, community, and organization. So as you can see, of that $13.2 million, both capital and operating together, 48% of it is being invested into community-touching programs or things for our customers or service. So again, that is aligned with exactly where we want to be, with the bulk of our reinvestment of revenues going to the community and to the service in which we serve. So the drivers, what makes the decision of where these buckets get filled and how? Well, a multitude of things, but primarily 3 as far as budget development is concerned. 1, annual budget development, the discussion that we have with you starting all the way back in the beginning of February and March of this year. 2 is the transit development plan. As Ms. Egan stated, we have done very well at tying the budget and TDP together as one strategic planning and financial planning document. We will continue to do that as we move into next year with that TDP update. And then a 5-year look ahead, something that we bring to you during budget development, of where, based on that TDP, where we look at the next 5 years, based on where we think we're going to be as far as revenue is concerned, what the state is looking at as far as revenue and property valuation growth, grant opportunities, and our federal formula. So again, these are the 3 drivers of where we decide to move that investment moving into the next year. So when we talk about these, what are we exactly talking about as far as investment? What's the bottom line as far as what's going back into each of them? So investment in the community. We're looking at a 5.2% increase in service and fixed route and flex going into FY17. That's $1.1 million of enhancement, which you saw on the earlier investment slide. That's 18,500 additional revenue miles. And that also includes the FDOT partnership for our new Tampa Flex. It also includes a premium transit study that we have underway. Continuation of the taxi voucher program, continuation of the first mile, last mile, major updates to several of our strategic planning documents, the TDP, a comprehensive operations analysis to truly see how we are performing both internally and externally, A shelter infrastructure study, something that we have not done in almost a decade. We invest a lot of money each year into our shelters, ensuring ADA compliance, ensuring that they are built along our routes that need them. We have not had a true good review of where we should be building them and to what standards we should be building them for almost a decade. We are going to come forward and have a study done next year so we can plan the next 5, 10, and 15 years for the shelter replacement program. And a future van maintenance facility study, something that we're looking at. We have said for many years, for the expansion outside of TDP enhancements to occur, we will need a second van facility. This is for someone to come in and actually do an assessment of exactly what do we need when that time comes so we can plan for it. Smart card implementation throughout the fleet. We go live on Labor Day with our Flamingo pilot of our e-fare media. We're moving forward next year with the implementation of smart cards throughout our fleet. Voice of the customer surveys. We came to you in the spring. The results of getting out and truly understanding what our customers want and how we can modify our service and invest in things to be able to accommodate those needs. We're continuing that, and we're also continuing that as part of our performance scorecard. Expansion of wireless infrastructure to HART facilities and to all of our vehicles. Right now, we have Wi-Fi on all of our fixed route vehicles. We are moving forward rather rapidly with getting Wi-Fi on our streetcars, on our para, on our flex, as well as in our transfer centers. Security enhancements. We're looking at putting surveillance in and around all of our transfer centers and parking lots to ensure the safety of both our patrons and our employees. Additional CNG vehicles, fixed route to replace our diesel fleet, to continue with our greenhouse gas reduction program. Additional demand response vehicles, as well as renovation of our transit center restrooms for both our patrons and our staffs. For our employees, we have talked to you over the last couple of months on investments in our online training programs, our USF capstone involvement. We are going to continue those in a much more robust fashion going into FY17. We're doing a lot of technological advancements. We're looking at IT modernization, and that requires our IT employees to be certified and brought up to speed on those technologies. We're making those types of investments. Continued investment in environmental regulatory training. Getting ISO 14001 is a great accomplishment. Maintaining it is even more of one, and I'll argue a lot more work. So we have to train our staff accordingly to be able to keep that certification. Pay for performance, I had mentioned earlier. A bargaining agreement for the Teamsters, again, before you this morning for consideration. An ATU will be coming forward. We will be bringing that back to you after the adoption of the budget. Break rooms, something that has been a long desire of our CEO for some time, getting put into our transfer centers for our operators so they get a place to sort of decompress and have lunch and relax. Renovations of several of our facilities. MTC Customer Service is having an overhaul. Procurement trailer and the heavy maintenance building. All facilities are going to be undergoing major renovations next year. And then roof repairs on 2 major HART facilities. Again, it's under employees, it could be under organization as far as infrastructure, but right now it's a well-being issue. It's leaking roofs, so we need to take care of those issues. And then investment in the organization. We're adding 20.5 FTEs going into FY17, with the majority of those being service-related. Environmental remediation costs, IT modernization I had mentioned earlier. We're looking at the development of strategic marketing plan. Increased budget for vehicle preventive maintenance. That includes streetcar. The establishment of a PMO and Project Management Institute training and certifications for that staff. We have combined and created a centralized PMO that will be running all of the projects within HART. Assessment of the 21st Avenue maintenance facility. For the last couple of years, we have shown you pictures of what flooding occurs out at our 21st facility. This is actually going to come in and do an assessment. We've wanted to do this for quite some time. We are actually doing it now and moving it forward in FY17. So we'll have an assessment of exactly what it's going to take to stop that flooding. And then a study to analyze the effect of the FTA asset management system, along with the safety management system, SMS. FTA has also mandated that all transit agencies develop an asset management system, automated tracking of all assets, federally funded and non-federally funded. That's an expansive job. We do a very good job now of tracking our assets, but not to the degree in which the FTA is now going to require it going into the next 2 years. So we're going to have someone come in and help us build that system and prepare us for that migration. This is a breakdown of the 20.5 FTEs. 15.5 are operators. 5 are non-bargaining and to complement our support staff in carrying out this investment. Now, backing away from the investment discussion, this is an overall view of our operating revenues for $72.7 million of operating revenues. Passenger fares ad valorem still being the biggest revenue generator for HART. And as you can see, when we go back to the investment of the discussion of community, employee, organization, the community was 48%, which replicates the 48% of our ad valorem coming from taxpayers. That wasn't intentional, and it was accidental, but I just noticed that it actually looks good, so I'll just highlight that next time around. Our operating expenses, again, employee costs are the largest expense to our organization. I was very pleased this morning to see Ms. Lee, because she is going to help with this employee cost discussion that we have, specifically around healthcare. It's a discussion that we have had with you for a number of years, and we are looking at ways to mitigate that expense again going into FY17. We feel very comfortable of where we have as far as the budget and our trends for this year, as well as the establishment of a reserve for next year just in case. But again, having someone be able to come in and really focus on this one key big expenditure is huge for us. We're going to hand out, so you don't have to try to
Thank God.
see this off the screen. This is our proposed capital budget. And typically we don't show the detail like this, but again, the next time that this is presented will be at the public hearings. We have a $25.2 million capital budget for FY17. If you go back to, well, actually, I'll go back to it. That's a 51.65% increase over FY16. A couple of reasons for that increase. It isn't that we just suddenly found a pot of gold. It's, well, we did in a way. We actually have very, very conscientious and dedicated staff that have taken the time to go back through all of our federal grants and all of our state grants and look for money that has not been spent, and holding those in the organization accountable for not spending it. And if you're not spending it, we're relinquishing it and we're going to move it. So we were able to free up a multitude of dollars to be utilized on this list of projects that you see here today. Again, our biggest capital investment are fixed route vehicles, looking at replacing our diesel with CNG. I'm not going to go through every one of these, just some highlights. You're looking at the wireless implementation, IT modernization, a facility assessment, customer service, MTC remodel, and the renovations that I talked about before. So again, I can answer any questions about those specific projects, but we have one of the most robust capital programs that we have had since we had the surtax dollars from the county about 4 years ago. So this is really great news. We're really happy to be able to get these projects underway and moving forward. We've done an assessment internally, both with the PMO office to be able to manage and move these projects through the pipeline, as well as the ability of our procurement staff. Every one of these requires at least one type of procurement, and bringing it back, most of them, to the board for approval. So it's a lot of work, but we're very, very happy to be able to have that on our plates coming up in FY17.
Jeff, a quick question. Regarding the opportunities that you mentioned in the grant funding where money was found that hadn't been used, are we back checking to make sure that the funds that we've identified and in the event they're reallocated, are still, that reallocation meets the parameters of the grant, and
Yes, that happens before it even gets on this list.
thank you. Okay.
All right, so our next steps. Next steps, we have a 5:30 p.m. Public hearing for the setting of the millage and the FY17 budget adoption on September the 12th. September the 26th, the final public hearing and setting of the HART millage and the setting and approval of the FY17 budget for next year. And then on October the 1st, we start all over again. And that concludes my presentation.
All right, thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it. Great presentation. Are there any questions or discussions? Anything for Jeff?
Great job.
Yeah, great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
This is really terrific, Jeff. Thank you for the detail.
Thank you.
For those of us who struggle sometimes with spreadsheets and numbers, this really helps to understand it in a way that we can get our arms around it. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right. Great. Next on the agenda, we have Ruth Grays.
And as Ruthie is coming to the podium to share KPIs, I just wanted to discuss very briefly. We've been talking that ridership nationwide is down, and HART is no different than this. We are looking at maybe being 5 to 6% down for this year. In speaking to our peers at other agencies, this doesn't see us in the front or the middle or the back. Some agencies like Los Angeles have been looking at a decade-long decline in ridership. Some agencies like Charlotte have seen a 5% decrease in bus, but their rail is stable. But we do know that almost without exception, everyone is looking at a contraction, probably due to lower gas prices, the arrival of more options for transportation, and a few other things that we might not be getting our hands around. So we are in the national trends. Just as we led with ridership growth, we have very modest contraction in ridership. We've got a couple things we'll be doing next year to get in front of this more fully, adding our hyperlink, which is our branded name for first mile, last mile. We're doing more of our outreach on voice of the customer, so our patrons who are with us can tell us what they're looking for. We are continuing to add the technology and other improvements which make service more attractive to encourage folks to ride. And as we do the TDP overhaul, we'll have a great opportunity to talk to folks about what service looks like that they need, maybe find some folks that are no longer riding with us and hear from them. So we're very well positioned to be in front of getting ridership into a stronger note for us. One thing I do want to stress, though, is with our KPIs, we've hit everything else, and that sounds... It's not to say that ridership is the only thing we need to be doing, but we've been able to really invest in quality of service. Ridership's down, but VMT, so vehicles mile traveled, that we're seeing in Hillsborough County is up. And so that makes our accomplishments in on-time performance and safety and our big improvement in maintenance that much more notable, because we're out there with more vehicles around and more traffic, and we're getting more reliable service with fewer breakdowns, fewer collisions, and we are doing excellent this year. Thank you very much, Greg and Ruthie, and our complaints per 100,000. So teeing that up, and I believe Reverend Bowers has a comment.
Yeah, I have a quick comment after Mr. Bowers. Yeah, go ahead, Mr.
Yeah, it's a question. As we look at the decline in ridership, and we look at our area where we have either underservice or no service in areas, as we plan forward, looking at the decline,
Yes, sir.
How do we compensate for that as we move forward in our growth?
That is an excellent question. Thank you. And again, a really great reason to have this overhaul of the long-range plan, so we can put these things into action now and not have to wait. An interesting thing for us in our ridership decline is we would stereotype that, given that our median household income on transit here in Hillsborough County is about $15,000, we would assume that we'd be seeing a big loss on these express routes and less on local service, and that's not the case. We're seeing some of our local services going through areas which are very low income, taking the biggest drops in ridership. So we really have to get our hands around what's going on and talk to our folks, get a better understanding than just, it must be discretionary riders who are choosing not to ride with us. So making sure we have the right data set to start from is key for us. We'll be doing that through the voice of the customer and our outreach on the TDP. And it also is a chance to go back and revisit some of our services which are less productive and make sure that there's not a different way that we can serve those travel patterns, maybe with hyperlink, maybe with cab vouchers, maybe with some different programs through TBARTA or FDOT, so we can reinvest our large vehicles where we know we really need them. So we'll be bringing sort of a toolkit approach. And don't know that our map that we end up with next year is going to look significantly different, but the tools we have to meet people's travel needs will be very different.
Thank you, Mr. Bowers. And Ms. Eid. Yeah, just one comment. I think you guys have done a great job of acknowledging or identifying, the national trend and where we fit into that, and not just kind of, attributing, things that we're seeing to that, but verifying it through the voice of the customer, which, by the way, was great presentations, the last two. So I look forward to the next ones. Yeah. Thank you all. All right. Oh, Mr.
Just
Carino.
real quick, I haven't been on this board long enough to see multiple cycles, but it seems to me that we may be looking at a bit of a counter-cyclical ridership situation as it correlates to sort of national economic growth or regional economic growth. And I guess I'd like to identify that if we can, because it does probably change how we talk to the funders, if you will, because I think what we experienced was when ridership was booming, economy was contracting, and all of a sudden our revenue started contracting against booming ridership. I'd like to maybe get in front of that next cycle.
We'll see you again in 4 weeks, and let's get some data back on that, because it's our growth. So from 2010 to 2015, we're up nearly 20% on ridership. That far exceeded national standards, and what we saw going on with our economy was, there's really not a nice way to put it, we weren't like that much worse hit to justify that. So as we were really growing, there was definitely a component of, gas was getting more expensive, there was clearly a recession going on. We also had service improvements we made in 8, 9, and 10. And if you show up tomorrow, you're going to hear this again, and I apologize, but we made a lot of late night and weekend improvements, because if you take the bus, it's a 7-day-a-week lifestyle, right? So you can go to work, you can go to school, you can go to worship Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Wednesday, whatever day. And we made those improvements that objectively should have grown ridership. And we see that coming in the same time that there was this natural growth going up. So we'll come back with a little bit more information on Florida's economy, national economy, and what we can pull and what we're seeing from some research to sort of put that all together. But it's an excellent point that we can overhaul service, we can get in front of stuff, but if it's part of a cycle, let's not punish our patrons by completely revamping service when it might be 2-3 years from now, we're going to be coming back and saying, oops, we need to get back to where we were. So we'll bring some more, we'll anchor it a little bit for the next presentation.
All right, any other questions? Okay. Ruthie, thank you.
Good morning, thank you. So we've brought this presentation to you previously, and so this again is the time of the year where we ask the board to again consider our key performance indicators for FY17. And so these are just some of the components that will be trending this year. Again, ridership productivity, the efficiency, which is a financial component, safety, which is our collisions per 100,000, quality of service, which includes customer service, and the mean distance between failures, so that's the failures on vehicles and the number of miles in between those failures. Our on-time performance, which is our fixed route system, and finance. And so Jeff will speak to the finance KPIs at the end of this presentation. So this is our grid. So you have what we've charted it in 2016, and in 2017 our recommendations. And I'll go over these a little bit more in the individual slides for those KPIs. But you should note that for Catherine stated that we are not changing some of them, and we are improved on some of them. So for example, on the safety goal, we're remaining the same for next year. We've reduced the number of complaints as a target per 100,000. So where we were at 13 per 100,000 this year, we're looking at 11.5 as we're looking to set our target a little closer to home. And our on-time, our MBDF, we had at 6,950, and we're setting that goal next year for 7,300. Looking again to continue our campaigns and maintenance to improve our service out there and availability of vehicles. And then our on-time performance, we've seen a great result there, and that's a lot to do with our truing up of schedules and our operators performing at their better levels. So we're looking to increase that target to 80% in the next year. And Catherine really talked about the reduction in ridership. So we'll continue. So ridership, the goal had been 23.8, and so far this year we're probably closer to 22.23 from our year-to-date average. don't know if we changed this properly on the grid. So in the 17 goal, we're looking to take it to 21.6. Of course, we're going to continue to monitor the productivity. We still have a few routes where we're truing up schedules, and our route surveyors are out there regularly looking at those routes and taking into account where those trigger points are that we could correct the timing on the route, or are there traffic points that we should be looking at and giving ourselves more time or less time. And obviously, we've seen our media boost in there, and we've seen our social media specialists putting out there the routes of the week and targeting areas that folks to kind of reintroduce the community to certain routes and the things that they're serving out there. So we're looking at all of those things to try to keep improving our ridership out there. And this is your passengers per revenue hour. This is what you look like from 2008 to this year to date. So you saw that we had lower numbers in the early years. We did boost up into the 24.99 in 2012, and then we've seen sort of a plateau and a slight decline from year to year. And therein lies where we've had this situation where you have the economy, as it was mentioned, and things that have changed in there. And so there we go. Safety, and so we said we were going to remain the same on this goal. We're almost there. I think we could meet this goal by the end of this year. We're targeting our training program. We're looking at the hot spots in the community where things are happening. Is there troubles making left turns or right turns in certain routes, and things that are affecting some of our safety concerns out there, including do we look at our vehicle and what's on the back of our vehicles and some of the things that potentially could be targets that creates rear-end accidents for us. So we're looking at all of those things. Our safety department has done a review looking at, is it time of day, is it location, is it the schedule, is it the operator, and all of the components, and trying to trend so that we can mitigate those things going forward. And so the collisions per 100,000 miles, there's your graph through the year, and like I said, we're pretty close to completing this goal this year, and we think that we may actually meet it with some strong initiatives that we have out there. The complaints per 100,000, that's worked out very well for us this year. We've seen a decline in the average number of complaints per 100,000 to 10.15. The goal was 13, so we're well exceeding that. And we think a lot of that, again, has to do with the improved condition of the vehicles, the better on-time performance, our operators out there getting training and refresher training, and of course that Voice of the Customer program, which has given us some latitude to understanding what our customers wanted. And as we're registering those complaints and we're seeing fewer of them, we decided to reduce that goal to 11.5. And you can see that we've been trending in that direction from 14 to this year. And the mean distance between failures, so our goal was 69.50, and we're so far exceeding that goal. We're super proud of our maintenance team. We had some changes previous year to our maintenance division and our staffing there, and I think some of the new staff has taken this quite seriously in ensuring that we have all the campaigns out there to make sure our vehicles are up to par, getting out there on time, and meeting this goal and exceeding it, if you will. So we've set the new target to 7,300.
And go back one slide, Ruthie.
Sure.
Thank you. So a point to make here is when you're looking at these numbers in 2010, 11, and 12, this is really a reflection of fleet age. We got a big infusion of new vehicles in 2009. We had, in that 3-year window, we brought in about 60 brand new vehicles, and you understandably expect to see far fewer accidents or incidents or things going on with your maintenance team. So the number is up, but again, our age of our vehicle is close to an average of 8 years. We're keeping our buses up to 15 years, and it's just a waiting of an option for us. Do we try to get buses in faster and make that capital expense, or do we do the maintenance necessary to keep them on the road? So we are happy to see the uptick. I can't guarantee we'll get back to those brand new bus numbers, but we are very happy with how our staff has been performing this year.
And so some of the things that the staff has been working on is, some of the things that have affected the service out there, diesel particulate filters, coolant system issues, and then, of course, the age of the fleet, which Catherine just mentioned. And we are expected to receive 13 new vehicles, so that does reduce the over 39% of the vehicles are past their FTA life expectancy, so those new vehicles will reduce for us. And then our mitigation plan, well, we continue to enhance our preventative maintenance program. Obviously, the new fleet helps to enhance the system overall. We've had some additional positions in FY16, which included maintenance supervisor and a few mechanics. And then the increased focus when the vehicle comes in at night to look at the things that we could repair and prevent before the vehicles get out there. And then our on-time performance, I think our big kudos to our operators out there and our service development team, obviously, for looking at the schedules on a holistic basis, really looking at the real-time schedule of what it takes to get from the point A to point E, the end of the line to the end of the line. And so we're exceeding that in 2016. The goal was 77%, we're at 81.5. We've trued up, if you will, the 31 schedules, and we still have a few to go. And then we're looking to raise our target to 80% next year, and we're super excited about that. And then I'll have Jeff come up and speak to the efficiency goals if you would.
Good morning. Jeff Stewart, Chief Financial Officer. KPI for efficiency really is a product of our overall expenditures and estimated revenues based on a formula. And our target for this year was, again, based on our FY16 anticipated expenditures and our expected revenues. They're looking at a target of 6.95. Year to date through 2016 right now is $7.14. We won't have an official KPI for this until after our books close on September 30th and we go through the auditing process. But based on our spending trends, the growth of our budget for FY17, we are looking and recommending an increase of the KPI to $7.17 as a target for next year. Now, as expenditures such as healthcare and risk claims are higher than what our expectations are as far as budgeted expenses, it will drive that number up. So we'll look at ways to mitigate that going into FY17.
Jeff, do you know what we closed out 15 at for our cost, this efficiency goal?
I do not.
We'll get on that though. Thank you.
Fund balance growth KPI. This is a KPI that staff recommended to be added to our measurements 2 years ago. FY16, our target, and again for next year, we want to keep at 0.5% of the previous year's fund balance. We did not meet this one I do know. For FY15, we did not meet it based on the over expenditure of healthcare. FY16 will be close, and FY17 we're building a mechanism into the budget to be able to meet the KPI. And actually, I'm working right now to try to get our spending lower going to the end of this fiscal year to try to meet the KPI as well. But 0.5 is a very generous target. Once we get the healthcare issue stabilized, I feel very comfortable that we will be able to exceed that every year.
So our KPIs, as we look at them as a transit agency, we look at other agencies nearby in our state and other areas, kind of look at what they're looking at and what we're looking at. And there's no trend per se or clear key performance indicator that all agencies use. They're not all alike. Every agency has separate benchmarks that they use for themselves. Some of the things that we use, like our on-time performance and our MBDF, those are not things that are reportable to the National Transit Database. So ridership is and those kinds of things. So you see a little bit of difference between the agencies in terms of what they're counting towards their goals or what they feel like measures their successes throughout the year. So they vary by agency. And then what are we recommending? Well, we continue that Voice of the Customer Satisfaction program. We do have another survey going out, I think this week, correct? Yes. Yeah, this week you'll see the Voice of the Survey surveyors out there again this year taking a look at how we're doing this quarter and looking at how we've measured against our previous surveys out there. And, we continue to look at our core group of staff and look to them to kind of bring back some recommendations as we get that information back. And so we have some different sort of subcommittees internally that are looking, how can we better our performance and safety? What are we doing to reduce our attrition? What are we doing to improve the internal customer, our employees' position as far as the agency is concerned? And so we continue to look at those and define our strategy to move forward. And then our other satisfaction measures, obviously the social medias, the mobile apps, those are the things that our customers are enjoying, and we know that we like hearing from them and that they enjoy using, like our One Bus Away app. We have Flamingo that's going to launch. Hyperlink is about to get out there, which is that connection into the service area. And you have our website and our surveys out there to get as much feedback as we could from our customers.
Thank you, Ruthie. Appreciate it. And thank you, Jeff, as well. Are there any questions for discussion? Mr. Jacob.
I have a couple, if I could. I think there's a couple things that, details on some of these I think would be real interesting to find out. One is, we talk about getting new vehicles and the differential between new vehicles when they come online for maintenance issues versus older vehicles. So do we know, do we track the percentage of time that vehicles at certain ages are down versus percentage of what you would consider their online route time? I don't know the terminology as well as I should, but in terms of what's the difference between the first-year bus, between a 5-year bus, between a 10-year bus, between a 15-year bus, and what are those typical percentages that those buses might be out of circulation because of maintenance issues? And is that something we can track, where we have we just talk about, how long we keep buses and keep them going, but is there a maximum life that we know based on those records that we could make more informed decisions in terms of when we increase fleet or change out fleet? I guess is my first question. I don't know if you have the answer to that or not. But.
Well, twofold. We do keep track of the maintenance schedules, and there are some things that are happening as a condition of regular maintenance. So there is some schedule to, whether you're 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, there's a midlife overhaul of engines and transmissions that happens, and we know at what year we plan for those in the vehicle's life. And the maximum vehicle life per the FTA is 12 years. You can extend it to 15, which we have done. So we do see some of those issues in the latter years that we know we're going to have some outages of those older vehicles. But we could bring back for you a more defined schedule look for that in terms of.
Yeah, I was just curious. That'd be great. I mean, I think it's real important to understand, how the life of a bus really impacts its ability to be in circulation and what that does to us from an economic standpoint. I think would be really terrific. Then the other one is, in the KPI, I'm wondering how we can maybe change or add a category in here that maybe looks at other opportunities that we have in the community to expand our service that gets recognition or really fills gaps. And the one I'm thinking of right now with all of the issues going on with the PTC and Uber and potentially Uber leaving the community, do we have an opportunity to fill the Uber gap in some way, shape, or form, especially in high peak periods, that we could come through and say, hey, you know what, if Uber leaves, guess what? We have a plan in place that can overcome some of these things and utilize this service in order to fill that gap. So I'm just curious as how we might want to think about that.
We've added that in our scorecard. So this is the first year that we have a performance scorecard for the agency. And Jeff's biggie was introducing, we're tracking down, finessing and introducing a set number of innovative service options within the year. I think the goal was 3, and we're delivering the 3. We were struggling with what we could have in a scorecard that would be useful ways to measure how we get to the KPIs and the goals which the board adopts every year as part of the budget. And again, as we go into the TDP for next year, it's a good opportunity to say, do you want, you as the board, is it time to update the vision? Is it time to update the mission? And then change the goals from the standard safety, et cetera, to focusing more on these type of things. So the answer is yes, we do have metrics that track back on that. We are on record, and I believe Mitch is still in the back of the room. And even if he's not, one thing for us to be really clear on is, since the rideshare market, to the extent that the PTC touches it or not, it falls outside the bounds of public transit. So I would encourage us to say, what can we offer that lines up with our mission that firmly squares away with transit? And we do. We have hyperlink, and just to meet the needs for the community would probably greatly exceed the budget we have. But once we get hyperlink out there, we'll have that tool and the ability to show that we're a viable partner in that kind of market.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ruthie.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay. Well, next on the agenda is the action item we move on to committee action items. And first on that list is the approval of the proposed KPIs we just were presented on. And do I hear a motion for approval to advance that to the board, or any discussion, or?
So moved.
So second. All those. Is there any discussion? Anything else remaining on that? Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Nay. Okay. The motion carries. The next item, committee action item, is item B, and I believe Ruthie is here to. Sorry. Go ahead.
Switched up on you. Greg Bracken, Director of Operations Support and ADA Officer.
Thank you, Greg.
Before you have the authorization for the ratification of the labor contract between Teamsters and HART. We started way back in 15 and stalemated a little bit, but recently we kicked it into gear, and we've gone ahead and completed this. It actually went for a ratification vote back in March, and it was turned down by the rank and file. So we reconvened and reworked it out. And before you, I have also presented some of the breakdowns of it. You'll see that the first year is the heaviest hit in the budget purposes. Two factors there. There was about 8 employees that were outside the classification steps that they were supposed to be at. So we made those corrections. And the other one is we trued up the entry level to make it comparative to our bus operators. So our supervisors are not making less than what the people that they're supervising are. So we've set that ground rule, and then we went from there, and we've actually combined all the many classifications that were out there before. Now it's maintenance supervisor and operations supervisor. So it's very simplistic, very easy to understand now. We even did away with the top 2 steps in the maintenance category. There are actually 2 people in those positions now, but we sunsetted those. Once they go away, those top 2 pay scales will go away. So that will save us a little bit in the long-term future. So, like I said, year 1, a little heavier than year 2 and 3. Total cost for all was $348,000 for a 3-year package deal. So.
And lower than we had originally budgeted, correct, Greg?
That's correct.
Thank
yes.
you.
And we also put into place, we're working toward getting them into the pay for performance too. So we put a placeholder in this contract with a 1% to get them in the game and get them up to speed as we develop our pay for performance plan. It will roll into their contract as we move forward as well. Okay. Any questions?
Thank you, Greg. Any questions, anyone? Okay. All right. Well, do I have a motion to advance, or actually not to advance, for the to authorize this for the chair of the board to work with Ms. Egan to ratify this? So moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nays? Okay. The motion carries. And with that, we are on to old, I believe it is. Old, and is there any old business to discuss? Finance and audit wise? No? None? Any new business? Okay. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you all.
Oh, the minutes, that's right. We did.
Oh, we did skip the minutes. I apologize. We are not adjourned. Excuse me. All right. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? Oh, did we?
We approved it.
Yeah,
You
we-
were out of the room when we did it.
Okay. Yeah, we
Director
did.
Bowers
We did.
walked
That's
in.
right. Yep. Yeah, he walked in just in time. So we are adjourned, and we'll. No, I think we're done, and we'll see those remaining for the Governance, Administration, and Operations Committee. Thank you all.